Under the blood moon's unyielding gaze, a single crimson tear froze upon the snow, whispering secrets of empires long devoured by night. Ilara's breath came in ragged gasps, the wind clawing at her tattered cloak like the fingers of forgotten ghosts. The forest of eldritch pines stretched endlessly before her, their branches heavy with the weight of winter's wrath, needles sharp as accusations. She had been cast out at dawn, the pack's howls echoing her banishment like a dirge. "Vampire spawn," they had snarled, their eyes gleaming with the feral light of betrayal. Her father's blood ran too thick in her veins, the ancient vampire king, whose shadow had once darkened the courts of both wolves and the undead. But to the Silverfang pack, she was no daughter of alphas. She was an abomination, an omega tainted by the night, unfit for the moon's embrace. The cold seeped into her bones, a relentless ache that mirrored the hollow in her chest. Snowflakes danced mockingly around her, each one a fragile promise of purity she could never claim. Ilara stumbled forward, her bare feet numb against the frozen earth, the metallic tang of her own blood lingering on her lips from the Alpha's final strike. He had been her intended mate once, or so the elders decreed, until whispers of her heritage unraveled the fragile bond. "You carry the curse of the blood drinkers," he had growled, his claws raking her shoulder, leaving a gash that burned with unnatural fire. Now, exiled to the borderlands where the veil between worlds thinned, she was left to the mercy of the wilds, or the lack thereof. In her trembling hand, she clutched the amulet, its silver chain cold against her skin. A single vial of deep red essence dangled from it, her father's last gift before his fall, a drop of royal vampire blood, preserved in crystal, said to hold the key to unbreakable oaths. It had been her secret talisman, hidden beneath her furs, but the pack had discovered it during the rejection rite. They tore it from her neck, only for her to reclaim it in the chaos of her flight, the vial now cracked, a thin line of scarlet threatening to spill. The amulet pulsed faintly, as if alive, syncing with the distant thrum of her heart. Blood and moon, symbols of her divided soul, pulling her in two. The night deepened, the sky a canvas of indigo bruised by silver light. Ilara collapsed against a jagged rock, the wind howling through the pass like the wail of lost souls. Memories flooded her, the warmth of the pack's fires, now forever denied. The soft fur of her mother's pelt, long since rotted in the earth after the Great Purge. Her mother, a captured Omega wolf, had borne her in secrecy, blending the feral grace of lichens with the eternal hunger of vampires. But secrecy bred suspicion, and suspicion birthed exile. Ilara pressed the amulet to her lips, tasting the faint iron of the crack. "What strength is this?" she whispered to the void, "to survive when belonging is stripped away?" The words hung in the air, philosophical echoes in the silence, as if the moon itself pondered her fate. Hours blurred into a haze of shivering torment. The cold was no mere chill. It was a living entity, wrapping around her like chains, forcing her to confront the emptiness within. She was Omega by birthright, meek, intuitive, the pack's quiet heart, but her blood made her something more, something feared. Visions flickered at the edges of her mind. Crimson rivers under lunar skies, wolves bowing to shadowed thrones. Her father's legacy, the curse of immortality's thirst, had marked her as outsider even among her own. Rejected not just by mate, but by kin, she wondered if the wilds would claim her before dawn, or if some darker predator lurked in the shadows. A distant uivo pierced the night, low and mournful, not of her pack, but something ancient, burdened. Ilara lifted her head, her silver-streaked hair whipping across her face. The sound carried on the wind, laced with pain, stirring an instinctive pull in her chest, the Omega's call to soothe, to heal. But she was broken, unworthy. The snow around her feet stirred, as if the earth itself sensed her despair, and in that moment, the amulet warmed against her palm, the blood within glowing faintly under the moon's watchful eye. She rose, driven by a spark of defiance, and pressed on through the thickening blizzard. The path wound upward into the Frost Peak Mountains, where legends spoke of hidden caverns and forgotten kings. The air grew thinner, sharper, each breath a battle against the frost that clawed at her lungs. Flashes of firelight danced in her periphery, perhaps a traveler's camp or the illusion of hope. But she dared not veer toward it. Trust was a luxury for the accepted. For her, survival was solitude. As the moon climbed higher, casting elongated shadows that twisted like serpents across the snow, Ilara felt the first true stirrings of her hidden gift. A warmth bloomed in her veins, not from the blood amulet, but deeper, where Omega intuition met vampire resilience. Whispers of paths unseen tugged at her, guiding her steps through the white void. She was no mere outcast. She was a bridge between worlds, though the cost of that truth had yet to fully unfold. The wind subsided briefly, granting a moment of crystalline silence, broken only by the crunch of her footsteps. Ahead, the tree line gave way to a sheer cliff overlooking a valley shrouded in mist. There, in the distance, a lone figure staggered against the gale, tall, cloaked in shadows, his form radiating an aura of regal torment. But Ilara turned away, her heart a storm of fear and isolation. The night was not yet ready to reveal its secrets, and neither was she. For now, exile was her only companion, the amulet her solitary light in the endless cold. The figure in the valley below moved like a shadow severed from the moon, his steps faltering against the relentless gale that whipped snow into blinding veils. Ilara's breath caught, a sharp intake that burned her throat as she peered over the cliff's edge. He was no mere wanderer. His cloak, frayed and dark as raven wings, billowed around a frame broad and commanding, yet bowed by some invisible weight. The wind carried his scent to her, a heady mix of pine smoke, iron-tanged blood, and the deep, earthy musk of alpha dominance laced with sorrow. It stirred something primal in her core, an Omega's instinctive ache to yield, to mend, even as fear coiled tighter around her ribs. She should have fled. The wilds of Frost Peak were no place for lingering gazes. Predators prowled these heights, drawn by the scent of vulnerability. But the amulet at her throat warmed again, the cracked vial pulsing like a second heartbeat, syncing with the distant rhythm of his labored breaths. Blood called to blood, or so the old tales whispered, vampire legacies entwined with lupine fates. Ilara pressed herself against the icy rock, her wounded shoulder throbbing in time with the wind's howl, but her eyes betrayed her, tracing the stranger's path as he collapsed to one knee in the snow below. A low growl escaped him, not of rage but exhaustion, echoing up the cliff like a plea from the earth's depths. He threw back his hood, revealing hair as silver as the moon's underbelly, streaked with the grime of endless nights. His face, angular, etched with lines of ancient grief, turned upward, as if sensing her presence through the storm. Golden eyes, fierce yet haunted, locked onto hers across the chasm. In that instant, the world narrowed. The blizzard's fury muted, the cold receding like a tide. An invisible thread tugged at her soul, pulling her toward him, whispering of bonds forged in shadow and starlight. But she recoiled, heart slamming against her chest. Who was he to awaken such folly in an exile? Trust was a blade that cut deepest from within. The Alpha rose slowly, his movements deliberate, regal even in torment. Blood seeped from a gash across his forearm, staining the snow in dark blooms that steamed faintly in the frigid air. He was no ordinary wolf. The air around him hummed with restrained power, the kind that bent packs to knees and toppled thrones. Ilara's mind raced, fragments of pack lore surfacing like ghosts, tales of the eternal king, cursed by a rival's venom 2 centuries past, doomed to wander without mate or heir, his heart encased in frost while his body burned with unquenchable fire. The Alpha King of the Northern Realms, they called him. Arcturus, whose search for redemption had scarred the lands from icy tundras to shadowed crypts. Could this be him? The thought chilled her more than the wind, for kings brought wars, and she was no pawn for crowns. He called out, his voice a rumble that cut through the storm like thunder wrapped in velvet. Omega. Your scent rides the gale. Are you hunter or hunted? The words were not a command, but a question laced with weariness, as if he too balanced on the edge of isolation. Alara's lips parted, but no sound came. Fear warred with curiosity, her vampire blood urging caution while her Omega essence yearned to answer. The amulet grew hotter, the vial's scarlet essence swirling within, as if urging her forward. She imagined its power, her father's blood, a curse breaker in legends, capable of shattering eternal binds. But to reveal that would be to invite chains, not salvation. Against her will, her feet carried her down the treacherous slope, the snow giving way in soft avalanches that mirrored her crumbling resolve. Each step crunched like breaking bone, the cold seeping deeper, numbing the pain in her shoulder but sharpening the ache in her chest. He watched her descent, unmoving, his eyes never leaving hers, eyes that held the weight of lost centuries, guilt etched in their depths like runes on ancient stone. As she neared, the connection intensified, a visceral pull that made her skin prickle, her pulse thunder in her ears. It was instinctual, this draw between Alpha and Omega, but tainted by her heritage, denied by the chasm of their worlds. She stopped a few paces away, the wind tearing at her cloak, exposing the gash on her shoulder. His gaze flicked to it, nostrils flaring at the mingled scents of her blood. Wolf and something darker, eternal. You bleed like kin, he murmured, his voice low, resonant, carrying the melancholy of one who had long forsaken touch. Yet your eyes hold the night itself. What curse drives you to these forsaken peaks? Alara's hand tightened around the amulet, hidden beneath her furs, its warmth a secret fire against the encroaching freeze. Exile, she whispered, the word tasting of ash. And you? A king does not stumble alone without purpose. Fear laced her tone, but curiosity burned brighter, drawing her closer, despite the rational scream in her mind to run. He was wounded, yes, cursed perhaps, by the faint shimmer of unnatural frost clinging to his skin, a remnant of the venom that had stolen his pack's loyalty and his own peace. 200 years of searching, the whispers said, for one who could break the bind of endless solitude. Arcturus extended a hand, scarred and steady, not to claim, but to offer. Fate's cruel jest, he replied, his breath misting the air like a sigh from the gods. I seek what was lost, a breaker of chains, but in you I sense alliance or peril. The empathy in his gaze pierced her, stirring the Omega's buried need to heal, even as denial surged. He was alpha royalty, she a tainted outcast. The moon above watched, silver light glinting off the snow, illuminating the bloodstains between them, symbols of wounds yet to mend. In that suspended moment, as the storm raged on, the first fragile thread of their bond wove itself, born not of desire, but of shared shadows. Alara hesitated, the amulet's pulse echoing her turmoil. Knowing this encounter could shatter her fragile solitude or forge it anew. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The storm's fury abated as if the moon had whispered a truce, leaving the valley cloaked in a hush, broken only by the soft patter of settling snow. Alara's heart thundered in her ears, a wild drum echoing the Alpha's gaze, which held her captive without chains. Arcturus, the name surfaced in her mind like a half-remembered prophecy, drawn from the pack's hushed legends of a king undone by betrayal. His hand remained extended, palm upturned in the snow, where crimson droplets from his wound melted the white into fleeting roses of red. She stared at it, the amulet's warmth now an insistent throb against her chest, urging her toward the unknown. Exile had taught her solitude's bitter armor, but in his eyes, she glimpsed a mirror of her own fracture, guilt's heavy crown, worn by one who had commanded realms yet lost his soul to a venomous curse. Hesitation fractured under the weight of necessity. The wind carried fresh scents now, sharp and predatory, threading through the pines like invisible scouts. Wolves, but not of her kin. Scouts from rival packs, perhaps. Or the shadowed hunters who prowled the borders for outcasts like her. Arcturus's nostrils flared, his body tensing into a coiled readiness that rippled through the air like a warning growl. "They come," he murmured, voice low as the rumble of distant thunder, his golden eyes scanning the tree line where shadows stirred unnaturally. "The curse draws them, as it has for centuries, venom's remnants, binding me to endless pursuit." He did not retreat, but his stance shifted, protective, as if her presence had ignited some dormant instinct in his fractured rein. Ilara's breath hitched, the cold air slicing her lungs like shards of ice. She could flee, vanish into the white expanse as she had for days, letting the wilds swallow her tainted blood. But the pull was visceral, an Omega's empathy uncoiling despite the rational barriers she'd built. His wound wept openly now, the frost on his skin cracking like old parchment, revealing veins that pulsed with unnatural fire beneath. 200 years, the tales said, since the rival Alpha's bite had cursed him. Immortality without peace, his pack scattered by paranoia, his heart frozen in perpetual winter while flames of isolation consumed him from within. And she, with her father's blood in the amulet, might hold the key he sought, though to offer it would bind her fate to his shadowed throne. The first howl shattered the fragile calm, a chorus of feral voices rising from the mist-shrouded ridge, close enough to raise the hairs on her neck. Arcturus moved then, swift as a shadow detaching from the moon, his uninjured hand closing around her wrist, not roughly, but with a gentleness that belied his power, pulling her toward a jagged outcrop where the cliff face yielded to a hidden crevice. "This way, little exile," he said, his breath warm against her ear amid the gale's resurgence. "The caverns of Frostpeak guard secrets older than our bloodlines. If we stand alone, we fall divided." His touch sent a shiver through her, not of fear alone, but of the forbidden spark, an Alpha's command softened by melancholy, stirring the Omega in her to yield, to trust, even as her vampire heritage screamed of traps in the dark. They slipped into the crevice, the rock walls closing around them like the jaws of some ancient beast, muffling the howls that grew insistent outside. The passage narrowed, forcing them close, his broad frame shielding hers from the dripping chill of stalactites overhead. Ilara's wounded shoulder brushed his arm, igniting a spark of shared pain that made her gasp. He paused, turning to her in the dim glow of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the stone, soft blues and silvers like captured moonlight. "Let me see," he said, not a demand, but a quiet plea, his fingers hovering near her cloak. She nodded, the motion born of exhaustion more than consent, and shrugged the fabric aside. The gash on her shoulder gleamed raw under the faint light, edges blackened by the Alpha's strike, her blood a strange mingle of silver-laced crimson. Arcturus's expression darkened, not with revulsion, but sorrow, as if her wound echoed his own eternal scar. He tore a strip from his cloak, the fabric whispering like a sigh, and pressed it gently to her skin. The contact was electric, his touch igniting a warmth that spread from the point of pressure, chasing the cold from her veins. "This mark, it's from rejection's claw," he observed, voice threaded with understanding. "I know its bite. My own pack turned when the curse took hold, betrayed by fear, by the venom that twisted loyalty to madness. I led them to glory once, under blood moons that painted our banners red. Now I wander, a king without a realm, seeking the one thread that might unravel this endless night. Ilara's eyes met his, the amulet hidden but pulsing in rhythm with her quickening breath. Empathy bloomed unbidden, a fragile flower in the cavern's gloom, as she saw not the legendary tyrant of whispers, but a man etched by duty's relentless forge. "And what if the breaker you seek is no savior, but another curse?" she whispered, her voice echoing softly off the walls. The air grew thicker here, laced with the mineral tang of underground rivers and the faint, acrid smoke of his blood on the cloth. Outside, the howls circled closer, paws crunching snow into the crevice's mouth, their enemy a common specter now, rival wolves drawn by the king's cursed aura, or perhaps by rumors of her exile, the vampire's daughter worth a bounty in blood and power. He bound her wound with careful precision, his scarred fingers lingering a moment too long, as if savoring the simple act of care after centuries of solitude. "Then fate is crueler still," he replied, his golden gaze holding hers, depths swirling with the guilt of fallen empires. "But in this refuge we share the storm's wrath. Your blood sings of nights I have lost, eternal, unyielding. Tell me, Omega of Shadows, what drives you to these depths, if not the same quest for redemption?" The question hung between them, heavy as the cavern's silence, as the first snarls echoed from the entrance. Ilara felt the bond stir deeper, empathy weaving into something irrevocable, a thread of trust born in peril, where protection was mutual, wounds laid bare. She touched the amulet through her furs, its vial's essence a secret fire, wondering if revealing it would heal him, or doom them both to the politics of thrones and betrayals. The howls grew bolder, claws scraping stone, forcing them further into the earth's embrace. In that moment, as firelight from a distant geothermal vent flickered across his face, illuminating the frost-kissed lines of his curse, Ilara chose alliance over isolation. Strength, she realized, was not in enduring alone, but in the mercy of shared shadows. What was mercy, if not the choice to bind fates amid the gathering dark? The cavern trembled with the intruder's approach, their refuge a fragile sanctuary, testing the nascent link between cursed king and exiled heir. The cavern's depths swallowed the snarls of the intruders, their echoes fading into a tense hush as Ilara and Arcturus pressed onward, the stone corridor twisting like the veins of some slumbering giant. The air grew heavier, laced with the sulphurous whisper of geothermal vents that flickered to life ahead, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls like restless spirits. Ilara's bound shoulder throbbed with each step, a dull fire that mirrored the unease coiling in her gut. Arcturus moved ahead, his silhouette a bulwark against the unknown, his cloak trailing faint wisps of steam from the warming air. The bond between them hummed now, an undercurrent of shared peril that made her skin tingle, as if the moon's light had followed them underground, threading silver through the gloom. They emerged into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness, where a subterranean pool steamed gently, its surface a mirror of fractured moonlight despite the Earth's embrace. Bioluminescent crystals embedded in the rock pulsed with an inner glow, bathing the space in ethereal blues and silvers, reflections of the lunar temples Ilara had only heard in forbidden tales. The heat here was a balm against the frost that had clawed at her for days, rising in tendrils that curled around her like tentative fingers, thawing the numbness in her limbs. But with the warmth came vulnerability. The amulet at her throat burned hotter now, the cracked vial within churning with restless energy, as if the blood sensed the chamber's ancient power. Arcturus halted at the pool's edge, his golden eyes scanning the crystalline formations that jutted from the walls like frozen sentinels. "This place, it's a nexus," he murmured, his voice echoing softly, carrying the weight of centuries. where the veil thins between bloodlines and fates. The curse clings here, pulling at me like chains forged in the first blood moon. He knelt, dipping a hand into the water, and winced as frost spiderwebbed across his skin, the venom's legacy manifesting in visible torment, veins darkening beneath his flesh, flames flickering faintly in his irises. 200 years of this, Alara thought, her heart aching with an empathy she could no longer deny. He was no distant legend. He was flesh and fracture, a king whose ethical core had weathered betrayal's storm, his melancholy a quiet storm that mirrored her own exile's void. She stepped closer, drawn by the pull, her bare feet silent on the warm stone. The Omega in her yearned to ease his pain, to offer the solace her kind was born for, but the vampire's caution held her back. The scouts, will they follow? She asked, her voice a thread in the silence, eyes flicking to the tunnel behind them. The howls had receded, but the air thrummed with unseen threats. Rival alphas, perhaps, drawn by whispers of the king's curse, or pack remnants twisted by the same venom that had shattered his realm. Politics of power lingered in every shadow, betrayals woven into the fabric of their worlds. He rose, water dripping from his fingers like liquid silver, and turned to her. They always do. The curse binds them as it does me. Endless pursuit, no peace. His gaze fell to her shoulder, then lower, to the subtle outline of the amulet beneath her furs. But your presence stirs something dormant. What gift do you hide, Omega of the night? The question was gentle, probing, laced with the curiosity of one who had long rationalized solitude as fate. Ilara's breath caught, the chamber's heat amplifying the flush creeping up her neck. She had resisted this moment since their eyes first met across the storm-swept valley, resisted the instinctual draw, the rational fear of entanglement. But here, in this lunar sanctum, denial cracked like the vial's fragile glass. Her hand rose instinctively to the amulet, fingers trembling as she drew it forth. The silver chain gleamed under the crystal's light, the vial dangling like a tear of captured sunset, its contents swirling with an unnatural vigor. "This," she whispered, voice thick with the weight of secrets, "is my father's legacy. Vampire King's blood, preserved against oaths unbreakable. It was meant to seal alliances, but in exile, it became my curse or my shield." Arcturus's eyes widened, the flames in them flaring brighter, casting reflections of gold and crimson across the pool. He reached out, not to seize, but to trace the air near the vial, as if afraid to profane its power. Blood of the eternal. The tales spoke of such a key, hidden in shadows beyond the packs. A curse breaker, born of divided worlds. His voice roughened with emotion, guilt's shadows deepening in his features. The air between them thickened, charged with revelation, the steam rising like incense to forgotten gods. As his fingers brushed the chain, a surge erupted, visceral, electric. The amulet ignited, the vial's essence glowing with fierce intensity, tendrils of scarlet light snaking from the crack to envelop them both. Ilara gasped, her vision blurring as her hidden gift unfurled. Not just resilience, but sight. A pathfinder's vision, unveiling threads of destiny woven through blood and moon. Images flooded her mind. Arcturus's fall, the rival's venomous bite under a blood moon, scattering his loyal pack in paranoia. Her own birth, a bridge forged in secrecy to mend such rifts. The gift manifested physically now, her veins shimmering silver beneath her skin, sinking with his cursed fire, drawing the frost from his body in wisps of vapor that hissed into the pool. He staggered back, awe etching his face, the eternal chill receding for the first time in centuries. You are the key," he breathed, realization dawning like dawn over frozen peaks. The Deusa's revelation, Omega blood laced with night, destined to shatter my chains. Not reward, but proof. redemption through one rejected as I was. His hand found hers, the touch a spark of union, empathy blooming into understanding. The bond solidified, no longer denied, but embraced as truth, love as trial, not conquest. Yet the moment shattered as distant echoes returned. Claws on stone, howls laced with triumph. The scouts had breached the outer tunnels, drawn by the amulet's flare. Ilara clutched the glowing vial, her gift's manifestation a beacon now, illuminating not just paths, but the moral precipice ahead. Arcturus's eyes met hers, fierce with newfound hope, yet shadowed by the duty that had marked him. In this revelation, she saw her own rebirth, not as outcast, but as the one who could crown mercy over fallen thrones. The chamber trembled, the pool's surface rippling like a prophecy unfolding, as the past's judgment loomed closer. What is destiny, if not the courage to claim the light hidden in one's blood? Comment, Luna, if you'd walk through the storm, for someone who saw your worth. The chamber's ethereal glow fractured as the first intruders breached the inner veil, their snarls rebounding off the crystalline walls like shards of shattered oaths. Ilara's grip tightened on the amulet, its vial now a radiant heart pulsing with her father's crimson legacy, casting erratic shadows that twisted the steam into serpentine forms. The warmth of revelation still lingered in her veins, silver threads of her Pathfinder gift illuminating hidden fractures in the stone. Escape routes unseen, but the approaching threat drowned out their promise. Arcturus stood beside her, his body no longer bowed by the curse's frost. The venom's grip had loosened, flames in his eyes steady now, fueled by the bond they had forged. Yet his expression was a storm of resolve and regret, the weight of 2 centuries pressing upon him like the mountain above. "Stay behind me," he commanded softly, his voice a low thunder that vibrated through her bones. Alpha instinct cloaking her in protection, even as equality thrummed in their shared gaze. Ilara nodded, but her hand brushed his arm, a silent vow of alliance. The Omega in her recoiled from violence, yearning for the mercy of words over claws, while the vampire's blood sang of calculated strikes, eternal and unyielding. What was strength, she wondered, if not the choice to temper fire with compassion amid the gathering dark? The pool's surface churned, reflecting the intruders' forms as they spilled into the chamber. 5 wolves, hulking shadows with eyes gleaming feral red, led by a scarred beta whose pelt bore the insignia of the Ironclaw pack, rivals to Arcturus's fallen realm. The leader shifted to human form mid-stride, his body rippling with the grotesque fluidity of the half-changed, muscles corded like twisted roots under pale skin marked by ritual scars. "Eternal King," he spat, voice gravelly with contempt, circling the pool's edge with deliberate menace. "The venom calls us still, doesn't it? Even in death's echo, you draw the faithful like moths to your cursed flame." His gaze slid to Ilara, nostrils flaring at her scent, the mingled wolf and night that marked her as aberration. "And what prize have you scavenged? Vampire whelp, exiled for good reason. The pack's whisper of your blood, it could end wars, or start them." Laughter barked from his companions, who fanned out, claws scraping stone, their forms a wall of fur and fang blocking the tunnel's retreat. Arcturus's posture hardened, regal even in the cavern's humid confines, his cloak falling open to reveal the ancient tattoo of his crown, a lunar wolf encircled by thorns, etched across his chest. Guilt flickered in his eyes, not for the fight ahead, but for the past it unearthed, the betrayal that had birthed his curse. "Vorin," he said, naming the beta with a tone laced in melancholy recognition. "You were Ironclaw's shadow once, but I remember your scent from my own halls. The rival's venom twisted more than my blood. It poisoned loyalties, turned brother against king. The air thickened with the mineral tang of the vents and the acrid bite of their sweat, the crystal's light glinting off bared teeth like stars in a bloodied sky. Voron's sneer twisted into a snarl, revealing fangs elongated by some dark elixir, perhaps a remnant of the same venom that had felled Arcturus 200 years prior. Twisted? You led us to ruin, Arcturus. Your wars for glory left Pax barren. Your refusal to yield the throne invited the bite that shattered us all. I served the true Alpha then, Ragnar, the one who saw your weakness. He marked you eternal to watch you suffer, and suffer you have. Now, with this curse breaker at your side. His eyes locked on the amulet, hunger flashing like lightning. We claim her blood for the Pax. Freedom from your shadow, or war eternal. Ilara's heart pounded, a visceral drum syncing with the distant drip of water, each beat a reminder of her exile's cost. The scouts advanced, two lunging across the pool in a spray of steaming droplets, their howls echoing like judgments from the moon's cold court. Arcturus met them with fluid grace, his form blurring into partial shift, claws extended, muscles coiling as he slashed through the air, drawing first blood that sizzled on the stone. The metallic scent bloomed, thick and heady, mingling with the sulphurous heat to choke the air. Ilara dodged a swipe from the third, her Pathfinder gift surging unbidden. Visions of trajectories, weak points in their stances, flashing silver in her mind's eye. She moved not as prey, but as bridge, her hand flying to the amulet, channeling its essence into a pulse of crimson light that dazed the nearest wolf, forcing it back with a yelp. But the confrontation clawed deeper than flesh. It ripped open the wounds of history. As Arcturus grappled Voron, pinning him against a crystal outcrop that shattered under the force, the beta's words poured forth like venom renewed. Ragnar's ghost laughs from the grave. You forgave nothing, king. Your mercy was weakness, scattering our kin to the winds. Now choose. Surrender the girl, break your curse alone, or drag us all into your redemption's pyre. Arcturus's grip faltered, golden eyes clouding with the ghosts of his pack, faces twisted in paranoia, loyalties frayed by the curse he had unwittingly spread. Guilt. His eternal companion surged. Had his ambition invited this endless cycle? Freedom tempted him. To release Ilara, let her vanish into the night's embrace, sparing her his tainted throne. But love, resisted and rationalized, now demanded proof. Forgiveness not as surrender, but as the war that healed. Ilara felt it too, the moral precipice yawning beneath her. Voron's companions circled, one raking claws across Arcturus's side, reopening old scars that wept scarlet rivulets steaming in the heat. She could flee through the revealed paths her gift illuminated, cavern veins leading to surface freedom, away from kings and curses, reclaiming solitude as her shield. Her father's blood had marked her for survival, not sacrifice. Exile had taught her that love was a chain, not a crown. Yet as Arcturus roared, fending off another assault with a swipe that sent fur and blood spraying across the pool, his glance met hers, pleading, not commanding. In that look, she saw her own rejection mirrored, the pack's snarls, the alpha's claw, the amulet's isolation. To abandon him was to choose her freedom, but at the cost of his soul. To stand was to wage war for compassion, binding her destiny to his redemption. The chamber devolved into chaos, bodies colliding in visceral impacts, flesh tearing, breaths ragged, the pool's steam veiling the fray like lunar mist. Ilara's choice crystallized in the heat of battle. She hurled herself forward, the amulet flaring as she pressed it to Voron's chest mid-struggle. Crimson essence seeped from the crack, not to kill, but to reveal, visions flooding the beta's mind, unveiling Ragnar's true treachery, the rival's ambition that had poisoned not just Arcturus, but the pack's entire, for power's sake. Voron staggered, eyes widening in horror, the fight draining from him as truth's weight bore down. It was lies, he gasped, collapsing to his knees, his companions hesitating, the snarls fading into confused whines. Arcturus pulled Ilara close amid the settling steam, his bloodied hand cupping her face, breath mingling hot and urgent. "You chose me," he whispered, voice raw with awe and torment. "But the pack's wait beyond, Ragnar's remnants, my own scattered kin. Forgiveness or war, Ilara? Your freedom hangs in the balance." The crystals dimmed, as if the moon itself held its breath, the amulet cooling against her skin, its light a fading ember. Outside, more howls rose, the confrontation's echoes calling forth the past's full judgment. Ilara's heart fractured under the dilemma. Love as redemption demanded sacrifice, but was it hers to give, or the freedom she had clawed from exile? The cavern trembled, the earth's pulse sinking with her turmoil as the choice loomed, mercy's crown or the storm of unyielding war. The cavern's steam curled like the breath of awakening gods, veiling the fallen scouts in a haze of reluctant surrender. Vorin knelt in the pooling water, his form trembling not from wounds, but from the amulet's unveiled truth. Ragnar's treachery laid bare, a web of ambition that had ensnared Pax in endless night. His companions shifted uneasily, their feral eyes dimming from red fury to shadowed doubt, the snarls dissolving into whimpers that echoed the fracture of old loyalties. Ilara's chest heaved, the amulet's glow fading to a soft ember against her skin, its crimson vial spent but unbroken, a fragile vessel of her divided heritage. The silver threads of her Pathfinder gift receded, leaving her veins humming with the aftershock, a warmth that chased the chill of exile but stirred deeper fears. She had chosen revelation over flight, compassion over solitude, yet the howls rising from the outer tunnels, swelling like a tide of judgment, reminded her that truths were double-edged blades, carving paths to thrones or graves. Arcturus released Vorin with a measured push, his bloodied claws retracting as he turned to her, the flames in his golden eyes steady now, unmarred by the curse's frost. 2 centuries of wandering had etched lines of guilt into his regal features, but in this moment they softened, revealing the ethical core that had endured betrayal's forge. He stepped close, the heat of his body a counterpoint to the cavern's humid embrace, his scent, pine, iron, and alpha resolve, enveloping her like a cloak woven from shared shadows. "The packs converge," he said, voice low and resonant, carrying the melancholy of one who had led realms to ruin and glory alike. "My scattered kin, Ragnar's remnants, drawn by the flare of your gift, by the promise of an end to this venom's legacy, they will demand judgment, my head for the wars I waged, your blood for the power it holds. Forgiveness could bind them anew, under a moon untainted, or war, to shatter the chains forever." Ilara's gaze drifted to the pool, its surface rippling with reflections of the crystals above, fractured moons in liquid silver, mirroring the dilemma tearing at her soul, the omega in her ached for union, for the bond that had bloomed from fear and curiosity into this visceral pull, a love resisted through rational veils of self-preservation, but now undeniable, a proof of worth in the face of rejection. Yet the vampire's blood whispered of sacrifice, her father's essence in the amulet. The eternal thirst that had marked her as outcast could cure him fully, but at what cost? To pour it forth might sever her ties to the night, leaving her holy wolf, vulnerable, bound to packs that had cast her aside. Freedom tempted, a solitary rebirth into the wilds, where destiny bowed to choice alone. But as Arcturus's hand found hers, scarred fingers intertwining with her trembling ones, she felt the earth's pulse through the stone, syncing with their hearts, a lunar rhythm urging redemption over despair. The outer howls crescendoed, claws scraping the tunnels like the scrape of fate's inexorable wheel, forcing the chamber's fragile peace to fracture. Vorin rose unsteadily, his voice hoarse with the weight of revelation. the truth. It burns like the first bite. Ragnar lied to us all. Use the venom not to curse you, Arcturus, but to claim your throne through our fear. If this Omega's blood can end it. He trailed off, eyes flicking to Alara with newfound wariness, not hatred, but the politics of power stirring anew. His companions murmured, shifting forms, loyalty teetering on the edge of alliance or betrayal. Arcturus tensed, his free hand hovering near his side, ready for the storm, but his gaze remained on her, pleading, ethical, the king who had carried guilt like a crown of thorns, now offering it to be shared or shed. In that suspended breath, amid the sulphurous steam and the distant thunder of approaching pause, Alara's choice crystallized, born of the fire that had thawed her exile's ice. Love was no reward, but a trial of the spirit, demanding sacrifice to forge rebirth. She lifted the amulet, its chain glinting like a thread of moonlight, and met Arcturus's eyes, her voice steady despite the tremor in her soul. War would claim us all, more blood under the moon, more ghosts to haunt the snows. But forgiveness, it's the true breaker of curses. Not power, but compassion crowns the fallen. With deliberate grace, she uncorked the vial, the metallic tang of ancient blood blooming in the air, rich and eternal. The crimson essence hovered on her palm, defying gravity for a heartbeat, a symbol of her renounced shadows. She pressed it to his lips first, the liquid searing like liquid fire as it coursed into him, unraveling the venom's final coils. Arcturus gasped, his body arching as frost shattered from his skin in crystalline shards that tinkled into the pool, flames in his eyes purifying to a golden dawn. The curse dissolved, 200 years of torment evaporating like mist before the sun, leaving him whole, king reborn, not through conquest, but mercy's quiet alchemy. Then, with the remnants, she anointed her own wounds, the silver in her veins blending with the red, her pathfinder gift evolving, no longer divided but unified, a bridge eternal between night and moon. The packs burst into the chamber then, a surge of fur and fang, alphas and omegas from fractured lines, their eyes wide at the sight. Arcturus unbowed, Alara at his side, the amulet empty but radiant. Vorin stepped forward, kneeling once more. We see the truth. Lead us, if mercy allows. Murmurs rippled through the throng, howls shifting from challenge to homage, the air alive with the scent of thawing earth and renewed oaths. Arcturus drew Alara close, his embrace a vow under the cavern's lunar glow, their union a testament. Rejection transmuted to destiny, love as the ultimate redemption. As they emerged from the depths into the blood moon's forgiving light, snowflakes falling like blessings on their joined hands, Alara felt the Renascimento settle in her bones, a queen in her own right, healed not despite her scars, but through them. The winds whispered of empires mended, under skies where every wound became a star. Strength was mercy chosen in the dark, and in that choice, they were free. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.